We can then continue by defining this level we made to use the Solus characters. So right now when we play, we just have a camera that flies around, and that's it. And let's say we want to have a first-person character like the one defined in Solus, then we need to tell the level to use the correct game mode or game type. So at the top toolbar it says World Settings, press that, and then you get the settings of the entire level. So these are level settings basically, and somewhere in here it says Game Mode Override. I'm going to click that, and we're going to set it to Solus Game Info. And by doing that, if you now play the game, then, well, we fall down because we start next to the level. Seems to be ignoring that. There we go. So when we now play the game, we have the Solus character. We can jump, we leave footsteps behind. So now it uses the correct game mode, and the game mode automatically brings along the correct controls and a correct character, if it's first person, third person, etc. The next step would be to add some basic brushes. So brushes are still in the engine. Brushes meaning it BSP brushes. BSP brushes got introduced in the 90s, so it's a very old system. Those of you who came from previous versions of the Unreal Engine will still remember them. Well, they're all still here. They have been improved some, but it are still brushes. They still have the same kind of limitations to an extent. And it's not the best system, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I do want to go over the basics. On the left part of the editor, we have these different tabs. So the different tabs do different things. For now, we'll just stick to the place one. So the first tab is called placing things. And this allows you to place different types of things. So you can place a box, a cone, a cylinder. You can place different types of lights. You can place different types of atmospherical things, and so on. So let's stick to the brushes for now. Go to geometry and then go to box and click and drag this into the scene. And then you get this floor. This is a brush. So this is completely different from the boxes we have over here. If I drag this in, for example, this is not the same as that. You can see it looks a little bit different as well. It has these blue points here, and it's called a brush, whereas this is a static mesh. So static meshes are models that have been imported. You can see here the greenish things, the greenish blue things, those are static meshes. These are models that have been imported from a 3D package. The grand majority of all levels will have been made up of this. Brushes, however, are blue or yellow, and they are generated in the editor itself. And they can't do as much as real models. So this is a much more limited system. So this should only be used really for the most basic shapes. You can see you have a cylinder here and you have a sphere here, but the cylinder and the sphere and the cone, none of that will work really well. So I would, if I were you, I would completely avoid all of these and just stick to basic boxy shapes. Otherwise you're gonna run into problems. And you can see here, by the way, I'm changing the view mode. So you can click this option here and change it to something else and look at the scene in different ways. This is with lightning, this is without lightning, this is in wireframe, etc. So I'll go back to unlit. I'll delete this box and focus on the brushes. So we got a brush. Those of you who have experience with previous generations of the Unreal Engine, you can see you don't have to rebuild anymore. So it automatically updates the scene now every time you do something. That's nice. You can see you can drag in a cone if I want to, and a cylinder, etc. You can change the dimensions of these in the properties on the right side. Let me focus on the box to begin with. So I deleted those. So if you want a different size, you simply type the size where you want to have it. So there is no builder brush anymore. For those of you who know the older engines, the older generation of the Unreal Engine, there is no builder brush anymore. You directly drag it where you want to have it and change the type here, which is much faster than the old method. You can also duplicate this one, so now I have two boxes. There we go. Now I build a little 3 blocks, a block standing on top of 2 other blocks, etc. You can also modify the shape of them a bit more than just changing the size of it by going to this tab, the geometry editing tab, And that allows you to select the vertices and the faces and the edges. You can select the edge as well, might be very tricky. You need to click on the right place, but should be possible like this. And then you can edit the shape. So I can, for example, do this. Or I can select 2 vertices here, pull them out, and now I've got a shape like this. Subtracting is also still in. I'm going to briefly mention that because I think it's a bit too much if you're new to the engine, but for those of you who have experience with Unreal before, if you set additive to subtractive, it will subtract away from anything it touches, anything it overlaps with. So you can also use that to make a bit more advanced shapes like that. However, it should be noted that this still is a box. So if I move the box away from there, it still is a box. So it's not because I subtracted this space away from it that this brush now actually has this shape. It's still very much so a box. It's only looking like this because if you were to look in wireframe, the original subtraction is still in place underneath as well. So this is a brush in itself. Anyhow, those are the basics. Let's move on by actually building something. In the scene that we're gonna build, we should start with the ramp leading up to the building. This is a very simple structure, very simple to do. So we should start building that. And I'm gonna start building the floor in brushes, just as a way of practicing brushes. But once I've built this floor, so once I've built this surface basically, straight ahead going down, once I've built it in brushes, I'm gonna delete the brushes again and do it in meshes. So we're not actually using any brushes at all in this level. Okay, so I'll delete the 2 brushes I have. Let me just delete these things as well. So we have a simple level like that. Let's drag in a new box here. And let's try to make the shape we have over there. So I have a simple box. It's probably too wide, but I'll just stick to the default size for a moment. If you now go to the Geometry Edit tab and you click on one of the faces on the side, what you can do is you can enable the extrude option. Then you got a warning complaining about this, but if you just click that away, it will work. And if you now click and drag a face, you move a face out, it actually makes a second surface, see? So if I now click edit again, make sure you click edit again. If you just keep on going, it will make another surface that's being pulled out. So I click edit again, then I pull it up a bit, click extrude again, pull it out, extrude again because this should be the flat area, extrude again, I clicked edit, I'm moving it up, and you can see what I'm getting at here. So now I have a basic brush like this. This is one big brush, similar to the floor we have over here. Can very quickly do that again, just so it's clear. Place new box, and change the size if you want to. Go to Geometry Editing tab, click on one of the faces on the side, click the extrude option. If you get a warning about something, then the warning actually mentions this button over here, so it expects to be able to have this set to the little cube icon. Click and drag on the face, drag it out, click edit, up, click extrude again, drag it out, edit, or actually sorry, extrude again in this case because it's a flat area, up, etc. Then you would want to texture this because right now there's a grid-like surface on top. So we have a couple of materials in Runes materials. And then, for example, this is a good, the one called Matte Runes Concrete Pattern 1. Click and drag that on, like so. And now we've textured the top of the brush we made with this material. We can then, because it's rather small as you can see, it's also misaligned. You can see here where the 2 surfaces meet, it doesn't align at all. So if you select the 4 tops and then look in the properties over here, at the bottom of this section, so in the same place where you entered the size of it, you also got these. And this allows you to move the material that's assigned to it. So if you click it, it will move. So it allows you to align it basically with each other. It also allows you to rotate it. You can do this, etc., or flip, or set the scale. So you can click the lock so both of them stick together. You can see it now, it's larger. However, it's still misaligned, and it would be rather slow to click here and then manually try to, this is not really easy to do. So there's a better way of doing it. If you have all the surfaces selected you want to align, there's an alignment section here. So a button called alignment, click that and take, for example, planar floor. And that automatically aligns it together. It also reset the scale, so let me set the scale back to, I think it was 4. Like that, or perhaps it should be even bigger. And then we have a floor like that. Again, brushes aren't used that much. It's mostly used for prototyping and experimenting with things, or making placeholder objects, for example, those kind of things. But the grand majority of levels, or almost the entire level, would be done with simply static meshes. In my game in Solus, I have not a single brush anywhere. Okay, so this whole system, it's a bit old. It's a lot improved over over Unreal Engine 3, for example, but it's still a bit old. So I'm simply going to delete it, and let's start for real now, building the proper scene. So the way we set this up is that we use modular meshes. Modular meshes meaning that all the meshes we use are simple pieces that snap together. So you can see, if you, for example, take this one, it doesn't really matter which one you take, but let's try to take this one. It's a pillar 20F. The system setup is so that you can, if you copy them, using a grid, make sure the grid is turned on, they will snap together. So you can basically keep on building, and it all snaps together. You basically have like Lego pieces that fit together and allow you to build anything you want. You have a corner piece here as well. And so on. The bigger the grid is, so you might want to work on a grid of 8 or 16, the easier it will be to align it together. You can see now the grid is 16, now it snaps together. If the grid is very small, let's say the grid is 1, you will spend a lot of time doing this. Like you move it, and then you try to match together, but now it's overlapping. You can see when it overlaps, it starts to flicker. That's a very bad idea. And then you try to align, but you can see that the smaller the grid is, the more precise it gets, but the more effort you also have to put in to try to find the right spot like this. That goes very slow, so using a big grid of 8 to 16 is advisable. We should still start by building this ramp here at the front, easiest thing. So let's start with the floor again, but using meshes this time. At the bottom of the runes meshes part, we have, for example, wall 7. And wall 7 is a very basic box, basically. It's a wall piece. And again, same rules apply here. It's modular, so it will all stick together. You can simply build walls. This is a wall, and I'm going to use it as a floor actually, so I'm going to rotate it. And then we need a ramp. So in that case, I'm going to take wall 10 or 11. Let's see which one fits best. I'll just add both of them for a moment. It's wall 10, wall 11 is too big, so wall 10, I'm aligning it. See, it's aligned, it's perfectly aligned with the other one. And then let's just duplicate that. I'm holding Alt and I click and drag the green arrow, move it down. This is a bit less flexible than using brushes because you have to stick to the size and the shape of the model, but it does go much faster and it's also better for performance. And it gives you more flexibility. You have more options to control here, more settings to set. With the brushes, you don't have much control over the settings, and the brushes are more likely to bug out. So again, for all those reasons, Solus has not a single brush anywhere in the game. Okay, so we now have the ramp. That's simply how I made my ramp. Very simple, very straightforward. My ramp is textured differently, so you can see it's a different material on it. So let's assign the right material to it. That's much easier as well than with brushes. Go to the materials tab again and find the right material here. It's kind of hard to see, it's quite dark, so let's just try. I'm just going to assign something and see what it gives. It's not that one. Yeah, it's the first one actually. There we go. You can see it automatically aligns correctly. It's automatically the right scale because it takes over the UV coordinates of the model, so it goes much faster. Then you can see on the side of it, you got this concrete beam basically separating the floor from the brick wall underneath. So it's this beam following the sides of the ramps, and underneath that we have a brick wall. So let's build that next. Going back to meshes here. The beam we're using is probably this one. Let's give it a go. It's a bit small though, so it's actually the first one, I think. Pillar 1A. You can see it's the same height as the floor, so align it next to it. Can be slightly above, that's fine. It's even nice actually, so you have a little of an edge on the side of the ramp. Try to align everything quite properly. It will make things much easier on the long run. Then I want to place the one that goes up, this one. I can drag it in here. I can also do something new here. I can also duplicate this mesh because it's already placed in the right place. I simply have to move it forward like I did here, like so, and then replace the modal that's assigned to this one with this object instead. So you can see in the properties on the right, it says static mesh here. If I select the one I want to replace this one with, so I have it selected and then press the arrow will take over the selection in the content browser, so I instantly have the right mesh. You can see it doesn't really align here. We'll fix that in a bit. So just building the side of it. Now you can already see where this is going. You're gonna have problems filling in the holes. I mean, there's holes here and there in between. There's several things you can do for that. Either you can scale it or you can find a new mesh that has been made just to fill that kind of hole. So in this case, we're gonna do both. There is a mesh called 1F. And 1F probably fits in between. Let's try. Might be a bit too short actually, so it could also be a 1B. You can see we simply have different lengths. The same mesh, but it has different lengths. 1B seems to fit better here, so try 1B first. When I have to keep it on the same axis, I don't tend to do Ctrl C and Ctrl V, because if you do, or I don't tend to do Ctrl W either. You can see if you do Ctrl W, it doesn't place the mesh in the same location. It actually places it slightly next to it. And then I would have to move it back on X to realign it over there. So it's usually easier if you simply hold Alt and you click and drag on one of the direction arrows. I tend to reassign meshes a lot as well, instead of always clicking and dragging in to speed it up further. For example, here I tend to just do this, assign, press the button, and done. Goes very fast. Speed is everything. You're gonna do this tens of thousands of times if you build a big game. So you want this the placement of meshes to go as fast as possible. Okay, so that's one side of the trimming on side of next to the floor. Then let's do the walls underneath. Walls underneath are very simple. There's some walls at the bottom here. So find the right ones. For example, this one will fit. It's a wall 57. I'll add that, and I need a straight section as well. So let's say wall 6 probably fits. Let's see how far we get with those two. Align it next to it. I'll delete the box underneath so I can see better. You can see it's the same width, so it's gonna fit perfectly. Make sure it's ending exactly where the other one ends. Actually, we need another one. We have the same problem here where it needs one more part, so I'm gonna take wall 5 as well. Actually, I can just instead of using that one, just duplicate this one again, much faster. I can also, because now I have the same problem, I have to realign it again. I can also simply right click, find in content browser, then it automatically selects it over here. I don't even have to look at the content browser, but you can see it automatically selects it. And then just press the arrow here so it takes over the content browser selection. So you can do that again. You can see, let's say this brush should become the floor as well. I can simply right click, find in content browser, click there, click that. I have the same mesh because the floor is the wall as well. You can see I want to take over the pillar, click there, mesh. This goes very fast, so you want to try to find those kind of workflow thingies to speed up production some. Should probably increase my grid. My grid is actually quite small. This is actually not really ideal what I'm doing, so Grid's actually 8. Let's go to 16 even, so it goes even faster. The bigger it is, maybe even 32. Again, the bigger it is, the faster the whole thing will go. The whole thing instantly aligns. That's that. Then there is this metal thing running over the top as well. And there is some pillars on the side. So let's do those pillars first. Pillar is this one. It's pillar 1i. This small corner sticks out at the top, so you might as well just add that as well. It's a 24H. Rotate this one. I think I probably scaled it a little bit, so I'm going to scale it to 1.25. Also, you can press the lock button here, so it automatically scales uniform. And you place it something like this. It doesn't really matter where exactly you place it, but something that resembles what we had in the original level. Same for this thing here. It's just a little decoration piece. It's a bit too small. Let's try scale 2. Might be too big though, but let's just see. Scale 2 holds up quite okay. It's probably a good idea to save every now and then as well. In the real level, I also have a bar that runs across. In general, in the real level, I have more detail than what I'm going to be able to build in a video, just in order to keep up the speed. So I'm going to skip on a quick few things. But feel free to look at the real level and compare and look at the extra detail I placed there. So I'll keep it more basic here. Anyhow, we have a pillar. You can see the pillar is made up of 2 meshes. I can duplicate these around, but then I always have these 2 meshes, which is kind of annoying. So you might want to consider grouping it together. If you select both of them and you do Ctrl G, it will group. And now it becomes a single object almost. Not really a single object, but a single thing to select. I'll duplicate this around. I'm not doing it very precisely. Should probably measure it a little bit more, so it's the same distance away from the edge here, but in order to keep up the speed, I'll do it a bit more rough. It's something like this in the real level. Actually, I'll just skip on the metal edge on top. I think you get the idea at this point. Then we should duplicate the whole wall on the left here to the right. And actually, this is probably you're probably gonna see this space underneath. So just for safety's sake, I'm gonna duplicate this once down, in case you might be able to look underneath in the final level. There we go. Then we want to duplicate it to the other side. So let me just select all the parts that it makes up. And just a tip, I'm selecting multiple meshes using Control. So if you hold Control and you click things, you can add things to the selection or take them away. So holding Control and clicking it again also takes it away from the selection. However, as explained earlier on, Control is also the key used for moving things. It's also the shortcut for moving things. So what tends to happen here every now and then is that while holding Control, let me show you that with this test mesh over here. While holding Control, you slightly click and drag, especially when the grid is turned off. You can see you might accidentally do this, slightly move the mouse while you click, and therefore you will move the mesh. So over time, you can see in people who are new to the engine, some of the meshes are slightly misaligned because they accidentally do this every time they try mass selecting things. So for that reason, usually my workaround is to make sure I have the grid enabled, and I set the grid really high. If you set the grid really high, then the snap distances are really large as well. And then you have to move the mouse quite a lot before the mesh moves. And even if the mesh moves, it will be very obvious that the mesh has moved, so you can notice it, that you messed something up. Okay, so just a small tip there. Try setting the grid high so you don't accidentally move things. And also in this case, actually, there's more meshes on the side than there are on the top. So to keep things easier, it would be much faster for me if I select everything in the level and then deselect the floor rather than selecting the walls on the side. So I could right click and I could do select all, or Control A. That gives me everything. There's a light here, so let's not take the light. And let's deselect the floor. Now I have all of this. Let's just group the whole thing together actually. So Control G that. Copy it over to the other side. Mirror it around. So I'm gonna right click and do a transform. This falls off the resolution a little bit here, but right click transform and then mirror X or Y. It's X actually. You can see this little arrow here at the corner. There's X points left. You can also actually see the red line on the grid. So if I should do X, it should fit, and it does. Align it. If it doesn't align properly, just go to a lower grid again. So I'm going to try 8 here, and 8 does it. There we go. Let's just go back to 32 to keep it easy. And I now have a basic walkway. The next easiest thing to do would be building the corridor in the building. So you can look at the corridor here. It's quite a simple structure. It's mostly copy pasted around, and it only is made up of a couple of meshes. So that's the next thing we're going to try to do. We'll start actually with the walls, the main foundation of the corridor, and then we'll move on to the floor and the pillars. So first of all, the walls, these are mostly ready-made. So you can see I have turned off the folder view here, so it's easier to actually see what you're doing. If I have the folders turned on in the content browser, you have to actually click folder per folder to see the contents. If you turn it off, then you can see all the contents of all the folders underneath in the root folder, which makes it easy to get a big list where you can easily search things, for example, and get all the results. We have 2 corridor meshes here, one low one and one with a higher ceiling. So let's just stick to the higher ceiling for now. Again, I'm not going to build exactly what I have in the example level to speed things up. So I'm going to cut some corners here, but I'm going to stick to it as good as I can. Here's the corridor. Let's just place it at the end of the walkway. Something like that. Actually, we can probably, or let me keep it there where it is right now. Then we need the pillars. So let's go back to the content browser here and find the pillars that we use in the level. That is that one. So set 5. The walls, by the way, were wall 53. And actually I use that one as well. So set 06 as well, 5 and 6. That gives me these 2 meshes. I'll rotate them upwards. Position them something like this. The second one as well. Actually, the second one would be better off being rotated all the way like this, so that the small section here at the bottom is also at the bottom of the corridor. Then we can see at the top the thing isn't not long enough, so let's get 03 as well. You can see if it doesn't align, like is the case here, you might want to check the location of these meshes, because they might have been placed not on the grid. By dragging them in from the content browser, it might have gone wrong. So if you look at the coordinates over here, you can clearly see the Z value is clearly not on the grid. So I'm going to restore that here, like so. You can also do Control End. You can see I just did that now. If you look at the top piece, this is 3340, so 3340 with a common number behind it. If I now do Control End, so the End key on the keyboard, you can see it snaps to the nearest grid point. If I increase the grid, see the grid's now increased to 8, and I do it again, it snaps to the nearest grid point of 8. And if I do the same with this one, it instantly fits together. Okay, so that's that. Let me copy the thing over. In fact, let's place this one right as well. It's somewhere in the middle between the two. Something like that. Select this and the top piece. Copy. Transform again on X. You can, by the way, also transform meshes if you give them a negative scale. So you can see if I change the scale to 1, it mirrors up. It mirrors up because of the X, not because of the Z, because it takes the local direction of the mesh. And the local up direction of the mesh is actually X in this case. Depends on the mesh per mesh basis. But transforming in Unreal is nothing more but making the scale numbers negative. You can see this part of these pillars were mirrored, and you can see they have scale X as well, negative X. Also, if it's too small, if the screen is too small, you can also always do F11 on the keyboard, which will maximize the view to the size of the window. And that fits. Slight texture misalignment there. I can probably flip the mesh around and that might help, but for now it will do. Then they should connect over the ceiling, which they do not right now. I have a mesh prepared for that as well, which is set03, which is the same one on the walls actually. Rotating around is actually better. It doesn't really matter that much, just visually. But the other side here has this metal part in the middle. There is one problem doing this though, is it makes things overlap, which in particular there goes a bit wrong. It starts to flicker a bit, as you can see. So for safety's sake, I'm gonna make sure it's not exact same width. I'm gonna make the top piece a little bit wider. So let's say 1.01. So it's slightly wider just to prevent any potential issues from overlapping. Then we should have the floor. The floor is made up of a central piece with a concrete trimming on the side and a second floor texture on the far sides. So I'm going to use Wall 05 to make the floor. Again, it seems to get the Z value wrong, so I'm going to do Ctrl End again. The floor is also slightly too wide, so according to my notes it should be wide 8.75. The scaling of the meshes, by the way, is quite a specific system and it might take some time to get into. I can show you that with one of these meshes over here. Let me make the grid a bit larger. There we go. So this mesh is currently a set number of units long. So if I'm going to take a guess, I'm going to say it's 1024 or 2048 units long. Now what we have here is a grid that's based on a power of 2. That's the grid that was used in Unreal Engine 1, 2 and 3. So I stuck to that and I began building with that grid before the new grid was implemented. So that's the reason why I have the power of 2 grid here. If I were to start a project now from scratch, I probably would have gone for the standard grid, the 10 and 100, 1000 based grid, because that's far easier to work with. If you work with a power of 2 grid, you have more difficult numbers to work with, and it's much more difficult to scale in particular. I can show you that. If I place a mesh next to it here, and let's say this mesh should be long. Okay, let's just say this mesh should cover the whole, and we don't have a second small mesh to place in between these two, so the next solution would be to scale this one until it fits, right? Let's say I'm gonna say 1.3 seems to be correct, so I have scale 1.3 there, but 1.3 seems to overlap. It doesn't really seem too much. Okay, fine, let's move the other one then a little bit. So I bring my grid all the way down to grid 1, and I'm going to try to align it. But the thing is, you can't really properly align it because this is still not aligned. You can see there's a very small hole in between, and this is pretty much impossible to solve right now. There is no way you can get this to perfectly align. And the reason for that is because if you were to look at the mats, so let's say that one piece of floor or wall, whatever you want to call it, is 1024 units long. If you do 1024 times 1.3, which is basically what the scale is, you will get this number, and this number clearly is not on a grid, right? So the only way you can scale these meshes is by scaling them with numbers like these, 1.25, 1.125, 1.5, or any combinations of such. So 1.5 plus 0.25 plus 0.125, is this. So any combination of half of each step would fit. So in this case, it would be 1.3, 125. If I take a guess, that was the wrong one. I have a very small grid, so let me just do it a little bit easier. If it doesn't, you can always calculate it. So let me just calculate properly. 1.25 is the nearest correct number, plus say 125 on top of that is 375. Let's subtract one step. This is half of 125. So yes, actually that should be a match, but I forgot a 1. There we go. And this will fit perfectly. There's no seam. So it's a bit confusing in the beginning, and this is much easier actually if you use the standard grid. Just wanted to point that out as to why I have a grid that's 875 and not just 0.8. I'll place it in the middle. I'll just duplicate it a few times so it becomes a longer section. We'll assign the right material to it, which is concrete pattern 1. So just click and drag that on it, like so. Then we need this concrete beam on the side of it to nicely finish it off. It's probably pillar 01M. Something like this. It's not entirely symmetrical, so it's slightly further away from the pillar than here, but it will do. Actually, I will just group this together so I can easily copy and paste it later on. Then we need a bit of a wall on the side of it here to fill up the hole in between the two. I can reuse exactly the same 2 meshes, however I just grouped them. So let's say I want to take these 2 meshes out without losing my group. You can ungroup things, by the way, if you do Shift G, but then I also lose my group. So let's say I want to take something out without losing the group. I grouped it again, so it's a group again. Then you can also do Ctrl Shift G, and if you do Ctrl Shift G, then you temporarily disable the grouping. So I'll duplicate the central sections now, and then I do Ctrl Shift G again, and now the group is back. Except I extracted those 2 meshes. So Ctrl Shift G basically turns off the group selection. All of those kind of things are, by the way, also found in various menus. For example, if you right click, you have a group and ungroup here, and unlock actually. Unlock meaning Ctrl Shift G. Okay, I got 2 sections on the side. Let me texture that. The one called concrete underscore brick concrete sidewalk fits the best. Okay, so now I have a basic corridor. I should duplicate this one to the other side as well. Group together. If you have to space things out over a long space and you want to spread it out evenly, basically, I tend to increase the grid a lot. So let's say 1024 actually. And now it's easy to get the exact same distance every time, as you can see. So it's properly spaced out. So that's the corridor there. And I need these 2. Let's just group them together even more. It's not really placed in the middle, so that's about the middle. Probably not entirely accurate, but will do. And same thing there. That's that. Same for the corridor and the floor. And now I have this corridor. I apparently ended up with a mesh on the side here that I accidentally copy pasted, but we have the basic corridor in place. Got a couple of pieces left and right, so let me I'll add a wall at the end to cover up the hole. I will take a wall 06. Doesn't really matter which one actually, but just a large flat wall. Of course, ideally in the level later on, the level would continue here, or you would have a door For the sake of the tutorial, I'll just block it off and have the level end here. And then that leaves the outside of the building, and then we can move on to other things. The outside of the building is basically 4 times the same part. It's basically just this one long bit here. So some form of pillar that goes in a bit, goes a little bit towards the building here, straight down, back out, and downwards. And then there's this thing sticking out here at the bottom. The first thing I need is a way of ending the corridor nicely. So I'm actually going to take the same mesh as I had and see if I can duplicate them again, place them next to it. Anything simple that basically would allow you to end the building in a nice way. I think that kind of works. It's what I had in the picture as well. However, it does leave these two standing here, and I don't want to have those. So I'm going to reconstruct this thing with separate meshes rather than these bigger blocks. You need a thick pillar first of all. So for example, pillar 29A and 29B, they're twice the same pillar, just different lengths. And you can also use 29E, I believe. So let's take 29E and 29A. This is basically the same pillar, as you can see, as the one is embedded on this bigger one. We might need another piece actually on top of this. Let's see if there's anything more we can use. So to recap thus far, because I'm just building this right now to get things to move along, I have I place these pillars here to cap up the end of the corridor, so you have a nice transition from the corridor to the outside wall. I place it like that. I have a cross beam going through here to connect this pillar to that pillar. The scale from this one is slightly less, it's 0.9. Again, to ensure it doesn't overlap with this one. Then I have a couple of thin walls here, which is wall 05, to fill up the space between this pillar and a second pillar, which is the same mesh basically as this one really. A second pillar here to bridge the distance between this to the next piece in an easier way. The wall fills up the little space in between the two pillars. Doesn't go all the way up yet, I'll fix that in a minute. Then we have these things here. So the mesh at the top is wall 45. The one underneath that is wall 46. The one underneath here is wall 45 again, 46 again, 45. Then I place a couple of small walls here. That's wall 05, just to bridge the difference between these and these, because you can see there's a hole here otherwise. It doesn't matter if it sticks out, this whole back part will disappear into the wall, so you're not going to see it, the fact that it sticks out. And then I have a wall in between here to bridge the distance between these two. And the wall in between is wall 60. And that's what I have so far. You can also see in the picture here, it has a different material. So feel free to assign a different material to it. You don't really have to, but for visual reasons, I'm going to do that. Actually, I can first just select all of them. And there's a couple of things you can do to speed up the selection as well. You can, for example, right-click one mesh and then do select. Select all matching meshes of selected classes or all classes. Doesn't matter in this case, there's almost nothing in the level. So select matching selected classes. Now it will select all the meshes of the same type. So I could basically select all the ones I know I need to modify. Something like that. And then do select. Now I instantly get all of those. And then I just add in the walls I need as well. And that's everything. So it goes nice and fast. Let's see which material it is. I think that one. Wall gray blocks underscore 2K. Let me copy it to the other side right away. We mirror it around. I've got the walls actually in between there. I can fix it in a second. Again, we mirror it. If I have small holes in between, I tend to scale it slightly. Like so. In this case, it's might overlap a little bit, but I'm going to place a really big pillar here on top to cap off this kind of stuff over here. So I'll simply duplicate this one again. I should have a longer version of this one. So I will take pillar 29A. I'll increase the overall size a little bit. It's really a big pillar on top. The thing with the whole architectural style is that it's very easy to just throw anything anywhere almost and everything works. It's a very forgiving style, which is per design. Keeps it easy to make levels. Also, just some random notes. If you're gonna copy paste pillars like this or bars or whatever, you can see that the texture repeats. For example, this pattern here, same. So then you can see it's just a copy. So what I tend to do in these kind of cases is mirror or rotate one of the pieces or all of the pieces. For example, I can rotate it, and you can see the other part, the other side has that strange part on the left. So it's a bit more random, so you get a bit more variation. I'm also going to add some slight decoration on the top of those big pillars. I'm going to use one I or one L for it, one of the two. So let me try both. I'm thinking one I is probably actually good enough, so let me try that first. Or actually, let's try this one. Just have something on the top of the building, so it's not entirely flat. So there's some variation in on the roof. I think it's probably overlapping slightly, but you can't see that anyway at that height. Just so it doesn't look flat at the top. Seems to work. The bottom is a bit too low, I think, so I'm going to extend this one down. And then we almost have our building. We should only also make sure we have a bit more space actually here, or some kind of wall or something to help it ease and blend into the rocks. So I'm going to extend this after all.